So we took this joint work with Luc Moreau. We did it a few years ago, and last summer we worked earlier to improve the model. So what is programming with energy? We all know that we have to put some energy into programming. But here we want in fact to adapt a problem where we want to program, of course, which are aware of the resources consumed. So resource management is a hot topic these days. There was a workshop at Malaga and Cooper on resource management. And we want to be able to control the resources that are used by computation. So you start with an expression. You start to evaluate an expression and you want to be able to control it. When you are able to control an expression, you want to be able to, for instance, balance the energy between several threads or several machines in order to get a more detailed control. And when you do that, you start with a new programming technology, which is a new computing style. That is, you have a given amount of energy, which is CPU time, number of printed page, whatever, and you want in fact to extract the more information you may have from your program with a given amount of energy. So it's a kind of inverse programming. The first time you just have an algorithm and you try to find a machine which is sufficiently powerful to get the answer, and now you say, well, I'm only limited because I have only this machine and this kind of energy, and I want to extract the more information I can from that program. So we did something that we call quantum, and it draws, in fact, historically on the sponsors of Queinnec and Kornfeld, and on the engines from Ivan Friedman in the scheme programming. We first formalized quantum in scheme, and then we realized that last summer that in fact we can now be a kind of framework which is language agnostic. And I think this is something where scheme and list languages are very good at, because many ideas in fact were invented in the list realm, and in fact got modularized, got into a medulla, because in many different languages. For instance, you can see many examples of using Tonstar and CUDA, and in very weird languages, and no people know probably where come this name. So I will articulate my talk with three things. First, I want to introduce you the concepts of programming of energy, then the primitives we have and the rules, the semantic rules we have, and then give you some examples. So energy, which is the first concept, is something easy if you just look at CPU time. So whenever you run a computation, it costs you time. It costs you heat, it costs you voltage, or it costs you electrons, it costs you printed pages, and so on and so on. Energy is a second-class entity, because you don't want, in fact, users to be able to create energy. Energy is a thing that should be only decreased. Only. And you also want users, if you give a framework which is sufficiently easy for them, users program their own kind of energies, and the framework is able to manage it. So energy, since it cannot be handled by the program by itself, is managed in fact by a tank of energy, which is a group. So what's a group? A group is the reification of a computation. So whenever you start the evaluation of an expression, and whatever number of threads it is made of, whatever number of machines it is spread on, you just want to say, well, I am interested in that computation. And now you control it with a group, which is a reification of that control, of that thing. And at the first time, 10 years ago, I had, in fact, only two operations on the group. The first one which says, I'm no longer interested in the result of that expression, so you just stop the group. And sometimes later you say, oh, I made a mistake. In fact, I am interested in the result of that group. So the group is the reification, and the framework I will present is an extension of that. All computations take place in a group. That is, the group sponsors, in fact, the evaluation of an expression, and it also controls the number of threads which are in, the distribution of the computation, and so on and so on. Groups are made in a tree, subgroups can be dynamically created, group are first-class values, that is, you can manipulate them into your program. And there are two important properties on groups. The first is that a group is able to detect determination of itself. That is, whenever a group has no longer any thread within it, and no longer any subgroup which is valid, then the group is terminated. And the termination of a group is a stable property. Once terminated, a group never resurrects. So once terminated, it's always terminated. And the second property is that a group is also able to detect the exhaustion of energy. That is, since all computations that are made in the group just decrease in energy, sometimes, eventually, the group is exhausted, the energy of a group is exhausted, and the group stops. And it's stuck with all the threads on all the machines and so on. So these are the two big properties of groups. So if you look at groups as tanks of energy, then you see that whenever you create a subgroup, you have to divide your tank into two parts. The one you keep and the other one that you give to the subgroup you create. If a subgroup is terminated, for instance, there is no need to lose the energy which is in the terminated group. You just take back the energy and put it into your own tank, so energy can be merged. And of course, just computing decreases the energy. So these are the three operations that work on energy. So here is the first primitive, which is called with group in the scheme tradition. So the goal is in fact to run the expression. So the expression is wrapped into a lambda expression, lambda group and energy descriptor. So you want to run the expression. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you where my finger points at. So coded group, we create a group and we start this lambda to run this expression under the sponsorship of a group. So it looks like a little the signature of OCC, which is a reification of a continuation. Now you have to give some energy to the group. So what you give is a split descriptor, second argument. The split descriptor is, as its name implies, a descriptor that says how I can split my energy from the group I am in to feed the new group I am creating. So the split descriptor just split the energy into two tanks, and the other tanks is given to the lambda. But in fact, since energy cannot be given as it is, because we don't have any need to manipulate directly energy, you just convert the energy you have given to the group into an energy descriptor. So you can see the energy descriptor as a kind of unit, for instance. So if I give you, if I have a split descriptor that says give 50-50, so give 50% of my energy to the freshly created group, then the energy descriptor will gain something like 20 gallons of fuel, okay, the unit of energy that you gain. So the expression now is able, in fact, to know in which group it is working, and it also knows the absolute level of energy it gains at its inception. The two other notifiers, in fact, are functions with the same signature that will be run when the group is exhausted or when the group is terminated. So here is the first primitive, a simple one, and let's give, in fact, the graphical rule for the creation of group. So here now, at the upper part, you have a group 1. It's a blue that doesn't render well, but the first group 1 has a tank of energy, which is symbolized by this red jerrycan. And it contains energy E, and there is one thread which is calling with group with a function F. So now we have a group creation, we create the group 2. It has a tank of energy containing E2, which is the result of the split descriptor applied on E. And of course, E, the initial energy, is equal to E1 plus E2 plus the cost of creating a group. So the creating group, group 1, is just left with E1, and the created group, group 2, is beginning its life with E2. So that's the first rule for creating groups. The second rule is that I said that group termination is something that is detected by the framework. So whenever the group 2 has no longer any thread and no longer any subgroup, and it is left with a jerrycan with E2, so you just transfer back the E2 energy into the group 1 jerrycan, and the group 1 jerrycan just gets something like E1 plus E2 minus the cost of transfer of energy. So you see that any kind of operation, in fact, just consumes energy, and this is the way energy looks like. There is also one thing. It's interesting to know, in fact, that the group 2 is finished. And to know that the group 2 is finished, in fact, there is a termination notifier. That is, a thread is created into the supergroup, the group 1, and this thread is running the termination notifier with a two important information, that is, group 2 is terminated with energy E2. So this termination notifier can do whatever it wants. If it is not interested in the death of group 2, it can just commit suicide, and this is all. So this is the second rule about group termination. You see that group termination, in fact, is a kind of generalization of the top level. The top level is a way, in fact, to just type an expression and get the answer. In Lisp, you don't have continuation, we have in scheme. So with continuations, we have a possibility that an expression returns more than once. So you can just type an expression and have more than one result. So group is a way to say, well, I'm waiting for the end of the computation until all answers are produced. And then you can say, well, these are the answers I gathered from the expression. So the third rule is the group exertion. So suppose that we have a group 2 with a single thread, for instance, TH, and the thread TH wants, in fact, to consume energy, but now the jerrycan just contains a little bit of energy, TE. So the thread cannot consume its energy because there is not enough in its jerrycan. So the rule is, first, the jerrycan of group 2 is empty, and the energy it contains, the TE, is going back to the group 1 jerrycan. So group 1 jerrycan becomes E1 plus the little bit DE minus the cost of exertion of transfer of energy. And then you have a notifier which is running the group 1 which says, well, there happens a new fact, which is that group 2 was left with DE and in fact was starving. So now the group 2 is completely stopped. No thread in group 2 can work, and that's all. So no longer any computation in group 2. So these are the three rules of the groups and the call with group. So if you look back to the properties of energy, you see that energy is consumed, so you just decrement the energy. Energy can be merged when you have the exertion or the termination of a group, of a subgroup. And of course, at the creation of a group, you have the splitting of energy between two different jerrycans. So all operations have an associated cost, and energy is never directly handled. That's why it's a complex entity. Of course, when you split energy, in fact, the only normal constraint is that the energy you are splitting is more than the fusion of the two parts, E1 and E2. So the basic rule is that energy only decreases. So let's give some example of energy. We can count U time. It's I would say the most obvious one, the number of printed page, the number of machine you are copying from for your distributed computation, for instance. You can say that access write file can be viewed as an energy. You can measure the number of messages you emit or receive and have an energy bandwidth. Many kinds of energies are possible. Since the only thing which are useful for energy is to know how it is consumed, merged, and split, then you can also have the user create his own model of energy. And you can, of course, have vector of energy, which is a simple map, in fact, on all the indexes of the vector of energy. So let's give now two new primitives, because the first thing is that the Queinnec group is just a kind of accounting, in fact. It doesn't give you, in fact, the power of managing energy. For instance, suppose you are starting a computation, in fact, two computations, and you say, well, this one is going well, it gives me interesting results, and this one is working, and I don't see anything coming out. So you can just say, well, I remove some energy from the bad computation to put into the good computation. So it's a kind of load balancing, but instead of balancing load, you are balancing energy, in fact. So we want, in fact, to have a primitive that allows you, in fact, to energy balance what you want. So the first primitive is a wedge. You await a group with an energy descriptor. And this says that you split your own tank of energy with the energy descriptor, and you give to the target group, the first argument of the wedge, a part of your energy. So this allows you, in fact, to remove some energy from you and to give it to a group. And so this is the rule. You have a group 1 with a thread that says that he has to give E to group 2. And of course, E is given to group 2, provided, of course, that E1 is bigger than E. And then E1 is decremented by E and the cost of awaiting the target group. It's a way, of course, to resurrect a group which is exhausted. So you just awake it. And if you give some energy to the awake group, it will be with a dotted line. But of course, when it gains some energy, it restarts again. The other primitive, and this is the last one, in fact, is a post primitive. So a post primitive is a kind of inverse of a wedge. You just say, oh, that group is not very interesting, and I want, in fact, to stop it, or to suspend it, in fact. So if you want to suspend it, the only thing you have to do is to deprive it from its energy, and it stops. Whatever it is, whatever number of threads it is, and whatever number of machines it is spread on. So you just say, well, I want to close that group, and you just take away all the energy of the group and all the subgroups. So this is a recursive primitive that drains a whole group tree of group recursively. And there is a double argument, and I will explain it in a short time. So this is the rule of post. So you have on the left the group that is posing the group 2. Group 2 has a supergroup which is group 4, and group 2 has a subgroup which is group 3. So you just say that you want to pose group 2. That is, you want, in fact, to suspend all the group 2, its threads, its subgroups, the thread of its subgroups, etc., recursively. So you just, in fact, drain the group 2, drain the group 3, and all the threads, one after the other, are just stopping. And all the energy which is collected is given back to the posing group, which is E1 plus E2 plus E3 plus etc. The problem with posing recursively a tree of group is that if you want to resurrect the computation, you don't know, in fact, how many energy you have stolen from group 3, group 2, group 3, etc. So the trick is that the pose has a second argument, which is a pose notifier, with always the same signature. And whenever you drain completely a group 2, you just pose in the subgroup a pose notifier, saying to the supergroup, for instance, group 4 receive a new thread with a pose notifier saying, I have stolen E2 energy from group 2, and I have stolen. And you have also a pose notifier in group 2 saying that group 3 was suspended with E3 stolen. So now, in fact, you have in fact recreated the information that allows, in fact, group 4 to put back energy to group 2, and then group 2 can run the pose notifier to fill back some energy to group 3. So you keep, in fact, the information of the initial distribution of energy you have studied in fact so far. So, it might seem dangerous, in fact, to be able to close a group. But if you look like at the code with group primitive, only the creating group and the created group know the freshly created group. So it's up to them to propagate that information or not. If they don't propagate it, there is no way to close a group because there is no reflection at all in that sense. You cannot observe the tree of group, and of course if you observe the tree of group, you know everything and you can steal energy everywhere. So due to the lexical scope, you can only steal energy from the group you know, and probably your own group, or the group you created. So let me now give some examples. So I try to give you some, I would say, fun examples, because all the stuff on energy I think is pretty clear now. So since I want in fact to have a concurrent example and distributed example, so remote function allows you in fact to invoke a function on the remote side. Parallel is a keyword that allows you in fact to create two threads, and the two threads in fact have the same continuation. So if you write, for instance, parallel 1, 2, you just get two answers, 1 and 2. And if you write times 2 parallel 3, 4, you just gain 6 and 8 as answers. Okay? Suicide is the inverse of parallel. It just kills the current thread. And we have a one less buffer for something. So the first funny thing is that you have the notion of critical section in concurrent programming. But with energy programming, you have a notion of energy critical section. Because sometimes, in fact, you want to perform some operation and be quite sure that you can finish that operation. So you have, in fact, to accumulate enough energy to be able to finish that section. So we can devise an macro which is with enough energy. So you just create a subgroup with that energy. So you have this energy, you don't communicate the group to anybody, and you just run your for. And of course you give the appropriate notifiers. So this is the only thing which is funny here, is that there is a notion of energy critical section. The second thing is that in scheme you have continuations. And continuations are pretty weird, because you know that you can enter a room only once, but you can exit from that room many times because of continuations. So the problem is that if you take a continuation into a group, and if that group is terminated, and if you invoke that continuation, you just get back into a terminated group. So terminated group is not a stable property. So you don't want, in fact, to have that. So how can we do it? We have to take position with respect to OCC, with respect to energy. So here is a possible implementation of OCC with energies and group. First, we define OCC, take a function f, and then we say that parallel, and the second term of parallel says that we have to run f on the continuation, which is lambda v blah blah. So lambda v blah blah is the continuation. The continuation, in fact, just commits suicide. So whenever you invoke it, it just commits suicide. But before committing suicide, it just enqueues the received value into a channel, a one-byte buffer. And then you can now look at the first term of a parallel. In fact, at the place where you take the continuation, you run, in fact, a server which is waiting for invocation of continuation. And when it gets one, so the let loop DTC, so it waits on the one-byte buffer. When it gets a value, it just forks parallel the value itself, which is returned to the continuation, which is what we want, and it also restarts the receiver, the server, that say, well, I have to wait for all the continuations invocations, of course. So you see that if you take a continuation with energy, you have to run, in fact, a continuation invocation server to be able to answer the invocation of continuation. And of course, that group cannot be terminated, since there is always a waiting thread in it. So the last thing is energy balancing, and this will be my last example. So here you want, in fact, to start many computations of a tree, and you want to be able to you are able, in fact, with the analyze function, to assert when you start two threads, which thread is giving you the more result for its cost. And whenever a thread is performs better than another, you just say to the other to give back some energy to the winner. So you load balance at every time you treat the result of a thread. One. Yeah. Okay. But last slide. So here you see that you explore the tree and you run in parallel the exploration of the car and the exploration of the CUDA, and you determine which group is better. And if you are not the good group, you just weight the other, your sibling, with a speed descriptor, which is what should be up. It's Arabian to say a little bit. So I finished, and these are the conclusions. So I just present you a framework for something which is more and more in the air. To control the elevation of an expression, to control many kinds of energies, and computations now may be resource aware. That is, they can try to figure out what are the good algorithms and put the energy into these good algorithms rather than the others. I'm done.
Have you applied this to anything yet?
Sorry,
Have you applied this to anything?
In a number of reports, we mentioned that, for instance, when you are programming mobile agents, you can in fact put these mobile agents into the framework onto your machine and confine them to say that this agent cannot print, but it can do this, or it can print 30 pages only. So we have this kind of thing. You can also have agents that are able to negotiate some energy with the provider and say, well, I really want to, I don't know, print 20 pages, so I'm ready to pay for that. And the provider just gives it the energy. So we have a framework where we can represent all kinds of things like that. Yes?
Yes. Have you ever considered a concept that's sort of the inverse of energy in the following sense? That, with energy, that something has to have energy in order to compute, and then if the energy runs out, it can't compute anymore. But, so the default is sort of, in some sense, to do nothing unless energy is provided. But maybe it would be useful to think about kind of the inverse of that concept, is that the concept that something could run freely as it wishes unless something has some reason to prevent it. Okay? And the reason for doing it that way is that most of the computation we have now, okay, is just, run the computation freely, as much computation as it takes. And it's really only in special cases sometimes that you want to put constraints on how much computation can be done and what. So I think maybe we ran into this with the original sponsors mechanism, is that it was too much trouble to manage positive energy for everything, and really you want to just, in a lot of cases, let things compute as they may, and then have some concept that's like energy, except it restricts instead of enables.
Yeah, that's interesting. In fact, we didn't think to this inverse step. We started from the engines, and we said, well, we want to be able to have a tree shape, a group, a nested subgroups, and so on and so on. And then we went last summer to this concept of vertical energy. That is, if you have a kind of energy you want to formalize, then the framework is able, in fact, to look at all these things. When we look at mobile agents, which was not the case at the sponsors 20 years ago, I think we rather want to compile agents before letting them compete on our energy. So I'm not sure that now the way has turned. I think we want now to confine things. But
the way you phrase it makes it sound like energy is convertible, but the definition makes sure it sounds like resource space is more a big term.
There is no conversion of energy. Or the only conversion unit is dollar. Dollar.
Oh, you're all good.
Oh, euro. Okay, thank you.